Hi, Terry here, and welcome to Times Gone Tech. Okay, so if you're looking for the second video, part two of my History of Energetic Chemistry series, that is coming up probably in a couple of days. I should wrap filming up either today or tomorrow, and then I should get it online, Sunday-ish, maybe. I'm taking my time on that one. There's working with chemistry. We want to make sure we get it right. So in the meantime, I thought I might show you my latest purchase. This is a modern reproduction of a 1748 British pattern land service artillery carbine. Don't you just love how the British military used to name things? They couldn't just call it an M16A1. Oh, no, they got to call it the British pattern land service artillery carbine. Pretty cool, huh? So anyway, this is modeled after the now famous Brown Bess, and was issued to the artillery. But if you notice it, putting on the ground here, there's a few little differences with it. First of all, the Brown Bess would have been about this much longer. And this is a 69 caliber, and the Brown Bess was 75 to 80 caliber. Actually, the reason I say that is because the Brown Bess was in service for over 100 years, and there were a lot of incremental changes made to it over that time. About around this period, 1748, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Brown Bess was 75 caliber. That's equivalent to a modern 12 gauge shotgun. This is 69 caliber, which is equivalent to 14 gauge, maybe. It's bigger than a 20, but smaller than a 12, 14, 15 gauge. Anyway, you might be thinking, yeah, okay, so what? What's the point? The Brown Bess had an effective, accurate range of about 100 yards. That meant a good practiced marksman could pretty well take somebody out at about 100 yards. It had an effective area range of about 300 yards. Now, what that meant was, say you got a group of people, like a platoon of soldiers, kind of squished in together, out about 300 yards, a good marksman with a Brown Bess could put a ball in that group. Couldn't pick out the target, but he could put a ball in that group. So, again, what's the point? Who would take a Brown Bess, cut about 9 inches off the barrel, reduce the caliber, so you've got a shorter effective range than the Brown Bess, and think that's a great idea? What's going on with that? Okay, well, it all started back in the early 1740s with the heavy horse. The role of the heavy horse was to punch a hole through the front lines and get behind the front line, get behind the enemy, where they would cause all kinds of havoc and mayhem, and attacking the artillery of the enemy and baggage train and whatever. Now, the whole point was to break up communications, disrupt coordination of the enemy. But to do that, they had to get through the enemy's lines. And the heavy horse were typically only armed with a couple of 62 caliber heavy dragoon pistols and a saber. And that meant they had to get really close pistol range before they could fire off even their first volley. So they tried carrying a Brown Bess so they could get a volley off sooner, but that didn't work out too well. The Brown Bess weighs in at about a little over 10 pounds. It's front heavy. It's hard to even point and hold even reasonably steady while you're on the back of a galloping horse. So it just wasn't very effective. So 1744, somebody came up with the brilliant idea of taking a Brown Bess, cutting the length down, reducing the size of the caliber a little bit, and calling it a carbine. And as far as the reduction in range and accuracy goes, that really just wasn't a problem for the heavy horse because they were charging right into the enemy anyway. They just wanted to get a volley off a little farther back than they would normally be able to. So range and accuracy, you're firing into a big bunch of packed men all packed together, shoulder to shoulder, you're going to hit something, right? So they came up with a carbine with a 37-inch barrel and about 50-ish, 52 inches overall length, and reduced the caliber from 75 down to 69. Well, it actually proved to be so effective and so popular among the heavy horse that other mobile units began looking at this carbine. And in 1748, this version was issued to the British artillery. Now, the thing about the artillery is we tend to think of them as being fixed, fixed on top of a hillside or whatever, but they were mobile. Those cannons were on wheels and they had horses up there. They could move those things around and even get them out of the way if they needed to. So they were considered mobile units. And they couldn't carry a brown bess on their shoulders and do their job with the artillery. Those brown bess, they were just too long, too cumbersome, too heavy, right? It was a real pain in the neck and shoulders, I guess, maybe even the back, carrying those things. So they started looking at a carbine, a shorter carbine for the artillerymen. And what they came up was this, which is basically the same as the heavy horse, except they cut the stock back a little bit. And if you notice, they've added a lug. That is not a sight. That is a lug, front lug, for attaching a bayonet, which obviously the horse didn't need because they carried sabers. So that would come in pretty handy for artillery if they ever got into close quarters combat, which they would be in if an enemy ever got behind their lines and was up against them. So again, range and accuracy really wasn't a problem because you're probably shooting 30, 40 yards anyway. So it really just didn't matter. So, oh yeah, one other change that they made was they added a traditional sling attachments, which I opted out on because I'm not going to be carrying this thing around. But now that I've got it in my hands, I think a bayonet and a sling would look a lot more cool, don't you? So I'll probably go back and buy one. So anyway, I will be introducing more features of this carbine in the next few videos. For right now, though, let's shoot some pumpkins. Okay, so for this test, I'm going to be trying out my version of cartridge load because that's how these would have been loaded. Civilians, for some reason, had a tendency not to use cartridges. That's why the powder horn was such an important part of the frontiersman's kit. And you'll notice that soldiers, foot soldiers, didn't carry powder horns. They carried a pouch with cartridges. So these are just absolutely horrendously amateurish. I've never really tried making an actual cartridge before, but my first percussion caps were pretty ugly looking too, but they worked. So anyway, let's give this a shot. And I've never fired this before. This will be the very first time I've actually tested this out. So we're going to go with a light load. We're going to go with 70 grains of a 1F musket powder. So to do this, we're going to bite the end off. Open it up. We're going to put some powder in the priming pan. And I brought my horn along just in case this doesn't work. In case this heavier gauge powder doesn't hold. Then we're going to pour the rest down the barrel. And then we're going to put in the paper and the ball. And if you want to know how big that ball is, this is a 31 caliber or double-aught buckshot lead ball that I shoot in my 1849 pocket gun. It's also used in buckshot loads in a shotgun and is used in buck and ball load in a musket. This is the 44 caliber ball that I shoot in my 1860 Army, 54 caliber that I shoot in my Lyman Great Plains rifle, 62 caliber that goes to my heavy dragoon pistol, and this is the 69 caliber that my British artillery musket shoots. And here we are. We're going to shove that down. I'm also not sure about this ram. I thought British military muskets of the period used steel rams. I didn't know they used wooden rams. Also, this thing is nearly impossible to aim. I've tried just aiming at targets, not shooting it yet. But because of the shape of this stock, it's extremely difficult to aim. It takes some practice to get used to it, I'm sure. So I'm going to be shooting from a closer range than I would normally want to shoot a rifle at, or a musket. It's a smooth bore, so it's not a rifle. So let me get my ears on. And for the purposes of this test, since I have never fired this before, until I get comfortable with it and trust it, safety glasses. Okay, let's shoot a pumpkin. Or let's try anyway. Oh yeah, baby. Boy, that barrel is warm. Not as impressive as I would like. I was hoping it would blow it up. I'm sure if it was a watermelon, it would, but entry wound, exit wound. That's a pretty good exit wound anyway. I mean, it didn't blow the whole back of his head off, but still, that's pretty good. Pumpkins have a tendency to not want to explode anyway. So, all right, let's try it again. Before I load this up, just a little bit more about how I got this musket. It was made in India, and it's imported by a company in Georgia called Veteran Arms. Now, Veteran Arms is a small family-owned company that has been in business for decades. In fact, if you remember that old Michael Mann movie, Last of the Mohicans, Daniel Day-Lewis, yeah, the Veteran Arms supplied all the muskets for that, including a little handheld mortar that's only shown in one scene. And they also sell, by the way. So they import these as non-firing replicas. Then they drill a touch hole. They test them, clean them up a little bit, and then they ship them out. Now, one thing that I really appreciated about getting this in is it was not covered with all that heavy shipping oil that a lot of reproduction firearms or even firearms in general are shipped in. I have no idea why they do that. I guess they're afraid it's going to turn into a big bucket of rust between when it leaves their factory and when it gets to the end user. Anyway, this came pretty much just ready to shoot. Now, I haven't taken it apart yet. I haven't tried tuning it or cleaning it up. In fact, that was just the first shot that I've even fired through it. So yeah, I got a lot more cartridges to make. I got a lot more practice to do. Um, I like Veteran Arms. They're who I got my Heavy Dragoon through. If you haven't seen that series on my refinishing, snazzing it up to make it look like a high-level officer's pistol, take a look at that sometime. I doubt if I'll be doing that with this because this is an artilleryman's. This is not an officer's gun. So anyway, let's try loading this up again. And again, I'm doing this right-handed, which is kind of a pain for me because I'm left-handed. So again, we bite the end off. Spit it out. Yeah, you can chew on it if you want or swallow it if you want. Rest goes down the barrel. And the ball goes in. That's good. And we'll ram that down. And I'm going to check this one more time. Yeah, see, blew almost all of the powder out. Be right back. See, the thing is, that cartridge produced such a seal going down the barrel that all that air in there has to go somewhere, and it's coming out that touch hole. And as it comes out the touch hole, it's blowing the powder out with it. And that's something I got to get used to is how to balance that, because you got to have some air gap between the ball and the barrel so that air can get out this way instead of all of it coming out through here. Or prime the flash pan last, which they didn't do then. They primed it first. It's also why I think they used a slightly larger hole. Anyway, let's try another shot. This time we'll try it. So stay with right-handed. It seemed to work out pretty good. Let's try a standing shot. Entry wound, exit wound. Let's finish up with a buck and ball load. That's 3 double-aught buckshot and then a regular sized ball on top. And at this range, it's kind of overkill, really unnecessary. There's our entry wound, main ball. And then we had him with 2 buckshot. And then coming out, exit wound and 1 buckshot. So the other buckshot probably came out that same hole because there's no hole anywhere on here. So yeah, it's a pretty good exit wound though for close range. Didn't blow it up though. Okay. So I got more pumpkins I'm going to be shooting over the next few days. One thing I noticed about this is it's fouling up very quickly. I either need to go to a smaller sized bullet or use a different kind of paper. Maybe the paper was a little too coarse that I was using, or something to maybe use less paper or whatever. Anyway, the 1748 British pattern land service artillery carbine. This thing's proved to be so popular among the British artillery, and the horses version was so popular among the horse soldiers that during the French and Indian War, again, think last of the Mohicans era, they were also used extensively by Highlanders, light infantry, and light horse, like cavalry. In fact, the heavy horse, they like this idea of a shorter firearm. I keep wanting to call it a rifle, musket. They like that idea so much that later on they even went with a shorter one, which was basically a heavy dragoon with a slightly longer barrel and a shoulder stock. Yeah, there it is. Made in India, imported by Veteran Arms.